Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about automation. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, how can automation enhance my DevOps workflow? I would say that based on what I've seen as to how people you should do DevOps in the average organization, I think that there are a few tips and tricks that I can give you that some companies seem to understand and some don't, in my opinion, because I've argued in another video a while back that the way that people define DevOps is not, at the very least, how I define DevOps. The average organization has a team, or more than one team, dedicated to what they call DevOps, but what they're actually doing is just operations, where you have a central controlling team that basically does everything for the developers. And like, I have such utter, I don't know what to call it. I truly, like, I'm against everything that comes with the term that they're using these days, which is called platform engineering, where the idea basically is that, you know what, instead of having the software developers learn the services that are native to the cloud platforms that you might be using, instead of doing that, we're going to build an abstraction layer in-house on your behalf so that you will learn how to use our custom version of whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing, because apparently that is worthwhile investments as opposed to just actually learning how to do it. And then they maintain that control over the software developers and all the infrastructure and so forth, which basically means that you can't actually teach. Well, in practice, the developers are stuck with the operations people, and that, I think, is the wrong way of going. And the same thing goes for when we talk about automation. So why in the world would automation help you in your DevOps workflow? Well, if we bring it back to what I was saying earlier, so if you do have DevOps people or whoever, like, you may or may not have been in a situation where you find yourself using Kubernetes for no apparent reason, because you have maybe one or two sleepy little servers, but your DevOps people, they are all convinced that that is the way to go right. Now, the reason why Kubernetes became a thing in the first place is because, well, it's not only the main, it's one of the main reasons. There are other tools as well, like Chef and Ansible and so forth and so on. You see, those sorts of tools were created due to the fact that the good old operations people had a bit of a problem maintaining large clusters of machines that needed to have the same software upgrades, is that sort of stuff, right? It's a bit how IT departments today in larger organizations have it, where your workstation might need to have certain upgrades or certain software installed, and in a small company, maybe you handle that yourself, but in larger organizations, it's pretty damn tricky to, update the operating system on 100 computers on the same day, or make sure that there are patches and certain software that you might have and licenses and all the sort of stuff that comes with that, right? And so what we do is we automate that sort of stuff, and that is what Kubernetes and similar sort of tools have been here to help us with. The thing that I personally advocate for, which is, well, I think it's the right way of going, is that you use something we call GitOps. Now, the basic idea of that is that we take it one step further. So, as I was saying in my little rant here about DevOps people, what they would usually do is that they will create some version of, you send them a request, and then they will help you do the thing that you want to do. Now, GitOps takes a slightly different approach, where the idea is that you take basically a Git repository. Doesn't have to be specifically that, but that is the basic idea. You create the configurations necessary to automate whatever it is that you want to do. So, for example, let's say that you want to deploy a new system or update with some source code or whatever. Like there's something in the infrastructure like that the operations people would normally do for you. Well, instead of having them take a ticket and doing them like that manually, same thing as I was saying earlier. In the back in the old days, they would connect to a machine, run some shell script or something on that machine. So we invented tools that did that for you, so that they just have to run the command. GitHub takes it one further, where you have the configuration in the Git repository, and then you make a pull request with the updates that are necessary that you want to deploy or whatever it might be, right? And then there's a pipeline that automates that whole thing for you. Now, the powerful part about this is that now, to the greatest extent, I mean, you can't do this for absolutely everything, but the more you do this, the likelier you are to not block people who wants to do something, because I promise you, if you have that setup I'm talking about, especially in a larger organization, you might have to step up with I don't know how many people just to make sure that there are enough DevOps engineers allocated at any given time so that they can actually do the thing that you want to do in a timely fashion, so you don't have to sit and wait and like all of that good stuff, right? And that's why I'm a big fan of this, because one part is that it's something that every single software developer, it's pretty easy to understand. I mean, I'm not saying that Git is easy, but the concept is pretty simple. You have configuration files, you have some type of system where you basically make a pull request with the updates that are required, and then the rest of the process is automated, because as you can imagine, there's quite a lot of time that goes into when you're a large organization, updating environments and so forth and so forth. And this is, I would argue, pretty much to me it's the sweet spot. That's why I really like it, and I try to do the same setups with my teams when I do things, where we design a like a CI pipeline type of thing where you can update a configuration file, and it doesn't have to be like for a specific tool. Like I do that all the time. I create my own YAML file which has like a little bit of documentation stating that, all right, so here's the suite of tools we have. It can be everything from logging systems to DNS servers to whatever it is, right? And then we have our own configuration file where there's some documentation saying that if you want this, add this config. Like I sort of just invent one, and then that hooks into the same sort of pipelines that you would run by yourself. It's just that it's completely automated, and so the developers, all they have to do is to make a pull request with the changes, and then someone needs to approve it. Done. Then after that, everything is sort of just takes care of itself. That reduces a lot of the workload on the people who do the DevOps or like the operations part, but it also makes sure that the developers sort of have some measurement of self-service, which is the biggest oversight, I argue, in people who tell me that they're using DevOps. If you're not designing your entire operations strategy around a self-service system, you are not, in my opinion, doing DevOps. Not at all. So what I want you to take away from this is that the way that usually automation enhances the DevOps workflow is that it saves you a lot of time. And the main bottleneck usually for people who do operations is themselves. Like, you don't have time to check the logs. So it depends on the setup, right? And that's why I tell people, like, the whole idea behind DevOps is, I argue, to push more of the operations tasks to the development team for the specific reason that they need to be able to go into environments. If something happens in production, they need to be able to understand how they run their own system and so forth and so forth, because one central operations team cannot possibly know everything that there is to know about the various systems in their ecosystem. And so that's why this thing came to be. I think the saying is, you built it, you run it. That is the mantra that DevOps is supposed to be about, and automation is a big part of that. And it is something where I argue the sweet spot is if you can give the developers the tools that they need, like ideally as close as possible to the thing that actually will be native to the platforms that they are using, so that they can check the logs, they can check the file systems, all these things, and then give them, like the operations people, provide them with the necessary pipelines or whatever to actually just update things in a safe and secure manner and so forth and so forth, and like machines and whatever it might be that they want, right? And then if you ask me, at the very least, you should remove as much as possible of the standard boilerplate stuff, which is where automation comes in. As I was saying, let's say that you're shipping new libraries, or you want to deploy new versions or something like that. Instead of having someone running a chef command or having someone SSH into a machine or running a Kubernetes command, the best I argue for is use a GitOps workflow. Create a repository with all the different configurations that you have, so that if you update that config file in that repository, you just hit approve on like a pull request, someone reviews it, seems good, and then the whole thing just takes care of itself. I mean, you can do the same thing with like Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions or so forth and so forth, but it's very customized, it's very flexible, and that's why I really like the GitOps way of doing things, because I use it for quite a lot of stuff, guys. Like I have the same thing for documentation, for example. I'm pitching to my company these days that, you know, all those emails you need to send out, and like when you update, you know, rosters or schedules and stuff like that, if you put all that in a Git repository, we can build a pipeline that checks if you change that schedule file that we have or configuration, it automatically does all of this sort of stuff, right? So there's a lot of power in that workflow, and you can do quite a lot of automation and enhance workflows and remove like lead times and stuff like that if you invest a little bit. And the rule of thumb I argue is try to just make sure that you don't make it too complicated. So like start with the stuff that you have to do all the time and put that into an automation. Like you can get shell script, it doesn't matter what it is, right? And start there, but be a little bit careful as well, because as I said earlier, some people take it so far that they build a whole system around. I mean, that's when the DevOps people or like the ops people go crazy, where they create basically their own cloud platform so that other people can use that to do something that could have been a config file in a repo somewhere. Have a great day.